I asked him when I was 4 if I could make a ring. And I made the whole thing myself. I remember him holding the blowtorch behind me so that I didn't set fire to the house.
This is the Ideas Lab podcast, where you can learn from great creative and entrepreneurial minds how to turn your ideas into original businesses, books and brands. Because in a crowded world, it pays to stand out. This is your host, John Williams, best-selling author and founder of the Ideas Lab London. If you'd like to turn your passion for arts, crafts, jewellery or handmade goods into a real business, then this episode of the Ideas Lab podcast is for you. Harriet Kelsall made her first piece of jewellery when she was just 4 years old with her father's help. Now she runs Harriet Kelsall Jewellery, which has over 40 staff. Harriet is also author of the book, The Creative's Guide to Starting a Business, How to Turn Your Talent into a Career, which recently won an award in the Business Book Awards 2019. Harriet has some really fascinating things to say about what really makes a difference between a creative business that takes off and one that flounders. And she explains how it's not simply about your talent or the amount of effort you put into marketing. There are lots of important lessons here about how to run any business successfully and how to manage that tricky balance between art and commerce. Welcome, Harriet. Thanks so much for making the time to do this.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Great. So you run Harriet Kelsall Jewellery, which was actually founded back in 1998. That's over 20 years ago, and you've won over 20 awards. You started your journey into jewellery at a really young age. Do you want to tell me what happened when you were, your father was a jeweller, was he? And
yeah, he was actually a doctor, an NHS doctor.
Oh.
But he was also a really talented jeweller, which is a bit of a strange combination when you think about it. But he was very good at making jewellery, and he used to make it professionally in that he sold it to people. And he used to, I used to sort of come home from school and find my teachers at the kitchen table talking about their wedding rings with him, because he used to sort of help pay the school fees by selling jewellery. So I was always really interested in what he was doing when he came home late at night and sat on his bench for a couple of hours. And I would sit there at a very young age and be completely transfixed by watching the flames and the hot metal and everything. And I asked him when I was 4 if I could make a ring. And he said, yes, you can make a ring, but it's not sculpture. This is design. So what you need to do is you need to draw exactly what you're going to make, and then we'll make what you draw. And so I did that. I came up with all these drawings, and I made this drawing of a ring with a huge purple stone with a rabbit on one side and a cat on the other, obviously. And the stone was really high from my drawing. And he said, right, well, we'll make exactly what you've drawn, because that's what you've drawn. And so he helped me work out how to do it. And I made the whole thing myself. I remember him holding the blowtorch behind me so that I didn't set fire to the house, which was probably quite sensible. And the only part he did was I drew the rabbit on one side and the cat on the other, and then he engraved those in, because that was a bit tricky. But all the rest of it, all the soring and everything I did, I still wear it now. I haven't got it on today actually, but I still wear it now. So yes, that was it was sort of open at the back. So I'll have to send you a photo of it. It's I still wear it today, and it's a great big amethyst on the ring. And so I was completely hooked, and I loved the whole process of actually designing it. And then the sort of that first time of actually making exactly what I'd drawn was really captivating and taught me so much about that. And then, I'd sit there at his bench learning from him, and he'd be tired because he'd just come back from a really long day as a doctor. And then he'd drop things, and I'd sort of say, oh, that's the cubic zircon and that's the diamond, and pick them up and pass them to him. So I learned about gemstones at a very early age as well.
Wow. Oh, that's brilliant. And I love the story that he made exactly what you drew. So that means that he didn't kind of, he didn't change it and try to round off the edges to make it suit, what would be the style.
Yeah, yeah, he was great like that, and luckily I'd seen a particular gemstone that he had that I liked. It was a great big cabochon cut, which is a smooth domed amethyst. So I'd sort of based my drawing around that, which I'm not sure what he would have done if I'd based it around something he didn't have. But yes, that was good. I mean, actually, later on, I think my sister and I had a very early entrepreneurial spark because we made some twisted 9 carat gold wire earrings, like little sleepers, that just clipped onto your ears and made it look as though you had pierced ears when you didn't. I think I was about 8 and my sister was 4 years older. And we took them to school and we would sell them to our friends for £1 a pair. But we got into terrible trouble because the parents of our school friends were absolutely freaking out when their little darlings went home and they assumed their ears had been pierced with a compass behind the bike sheds. But actually they hadn't. They were just clipped on, but they were so realistic.
Yeah.
We got quite told off at school, and so yes, that quickly extinguished that early entrepreneurial spark for a couple of years.
But that's good. Well, good entrepreneurial spirit, selling them for £1. I love that. So now tell us what Harriet Kelsall Jewellery is like today, because it's very different. You've got quite a few staff, haven't you?
Yeah, we're a team of 40 altogether.
Wow.
And we specialise in bespoke jewellery. So that we sort of started a wave when I started the company of actually bringing bespoke jewellery to the high street, which hadn't really been done before. You know, if you wanted something made, you either had to have buckets of money and go to Bond Street, or you might know a bloke with a workbench who might do something a bit like what you asked, but there wasn't any actual design element to it. So that's what I sort of changed. And so, yeah, we now have 3 studios. Our sort of main jewellery centre where we make the jewellery is in North Hertfordshire, fairly near Baldock in the countryside. And it's a big converted barn where we have a coffee shop so people can have a coffee and watch the jewellers through a glass walled room where they make the jewellery. And there's an educational area. We do sort of kids jewellery making events and things like that there as well. And obviously just a showroom and shops. You can just come and look. And people sit down with the designers on a one-to-one basis and then talk about their ideas, and then we make something that's perfect for them. And then we also have 2 other much smaller design studios. One's in central Cambridge, and the other one is in North London in Primrose Hill. Sorry, did you just hear that ding?
What was it?
Oh, right. Oh, sorry, it was something popping up on my computer. So we also have 2 other much smaller but beautiful studios. One's in Cambridge, in the centre there, and one is in North London in Primrose Hill. And there we don't actually make any jewellery, but they're both staffed entirely by designers. We don't really believe in sales staff. We much prefer designers to interact directly with people. And so 3 bases altogether. The London one's the newest. We only opened it last year, just a year ago. So that's been an exciting adventure.
I think I was reading somewhere on your site. Was there a deliberate choice about Primrose Hill rather than trying to be near Bond Street or somewhere like that?
Yes, exactly. We wanted to be somewhere where it was sort of a little bit romantic, a sort of romantic destination, where people could make a day of it, and also an area where there are specialists and where there's a bit of a community of its own, if you like. And I felt it was funny. We looked all over London. We spent ages looking around all the different areas. And actually, I used to live in Primrose Hill years ago, and weirdly didn't think of it for ages. And then suddenly someone said, "What about Primrose Hill?" And I sort of thought, "Oh, that's an interesting idea." So went along and thought this is perfect, because there are actually quite a lot of very good specialist businesses there on Regent's Park Road near where we are. A great bookshop, great community. You can have a romantic picnic in the park. Lots of very famous films have been shot there. Lots of Hugh Grant films and things like that. So it's sort of known as a romantic destination anyway. So it really fits. We've been really happy with the location.
That's really clever, and because it's just one thing. It's just such a seemingly small thing, the location of your shop, but it's so important because I was in that area. I think it might have been last summer actually, and we had a picnic on the in the park there, and then walked down to this high street that felt like it was from a time decades ago that you might shoot a Richard Curtis film in.
Yes, it is
And,
lovely, and there's a different
yeah.
atmosphere there.
So when you drive there, or you get there and you turn up, you feel like you're already starting to unfold a story about what you're doing, which is often creating a unique engagement ring, for instance. Is that one of the more common things that you do?
Yes, we do lots of engagement rings. That's often the first thing that people do with us, and then they get hooked. But actually, having said that, one thing that we're also doing a lot of is what I like to call glamorous recycling, which is people bring along jewellery that they've inherited or that they've got at the back of their jewellery box and they're not wearing anymore. And we melt up the metal, the gold or the platinum or whatever it is, and potentially repolish the gemstones if they need it, and design and make something completely new for them, which is wonderful. And it's great to take a whole load of material and make it into something completely fresh that's really right for the individual. And actually, I feel like that's one of the wonderful things about jewelry materials, is that they're going to outlive us. The metal and the diamonds, they're already billions of years old, and for us, ethics has always been a really strong driver. We've done a lot in the industry around ethics, like launching Fairtrade Gold, and we've done a lot in that area. And so recycling to me is a natural thing that at least people do realise you can do with jewellery. But it's quite fun to reuse those materials rather than mine them afresh.
I was going to ask about the ethical stance that you've taken, because there's a lot of work you're doing in this area. And you said you launched Fairtrade Gold?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, in 2011. So me and a few other jewellers had been pushing using this, what we were calling fairly traded gold at the time, which was using the principles of Fairtrade Gold. But the Fairtrade Foundation hadn't got involved and done all the paperwork yet. And a friend of mine, Greg Valerio, was really pushing it forward with the Fairtrade Foundation. And when I met him, because he wasn't a friend yet, he became a friend. He found out that I was using this gold and asked me to help and bring others along. And I got involved helping the Fairtrade Foundation with their route to bespoke jewellers, and how that would work for a company like ours, and how the sort of licensing paperwork trail had to work in that area. And then we were one of the first 20 jewellers to launch Fairtrade Gold worldwide, which was really exciting. And then we also became the first jeweller in the world to be certified by the Responsible Jewellery Council and also licensed to sell Fairtrade Gold. So yeah, we've been driving at responsibility from all different angles.
So that means that because there have been a number of scandals around diamonds and so on, but also precious metals as well as materials for jewelry.
Yeah,
about the people who actually source them are working in the mines or wherever it might be, working under terrible conditions. So Fairtrade Gold ensures that presumably people who are involved in the sourcing of the gold actually get a fair wage. Is that the idea?
That's the first principle, that they get a fair wage, but also they get something extra, which is very important for people to look out for the fair trade logo rather than some of these other labels. Because what the fair trade logo means, whatever product it's on, is not only do people get a fair price, but they also get something called a premium, which is an extra load of money that they get to spend on their communities as they see fit. So, for example, some communities decide they need a maternity hospital, or the gold community in Peru that we were working with decided that they needed to convert their school, which was basically a shack, into a much better environment. And they bought a few computers for the older kids and some educational toys for the younger kids, which was a complete change to what they were doing. It's helped them enormously. So that's very important behind the fair trade label as well. And also they do things like educate the workers about health and safety, about women's rights in the workplace, and all sorts of other issues surrounding whether it be mining or whether it be farming, whatever it is that the product is. So yeah, it's a really great set of values that they have. It's an important label.
Well, that's great to hear. And part of the reason I want to speak to you is because you've written this great book, which is The Creator's Guide to Starting a Business, How to Turn Your Talent into a Business. Is that right?
Yes, and that's right. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying it's great.
Well, I enjoyed it, and I was on you submitted it for, or somebody submitted it for the Business Book Awards 2019. And I was on the judging panel again this year, and I was very keen for you to win in that category of startup inspiration, because I felt like you've written a really a book that was inspiring, but also has some really practical advice. And that's my favorite mix. It's like you want to read a book that you feel excited when you read it, and part of that came through the lovely case studies you've got in there. People in lots of different forms of arts, crafts, jewelry, even perfumes. And but you've also got like some practical advice about what you do as well. Some of that comes from the case studies. But I think the thing that really interests me is that there are so many people who want to make a living that I come across, want to make a living from their art, their craft, from jewelry, from the things that are handmade. Most of them, in my experience, don't succeed. So what I'm wondering is, what's the difference between those people who have some ability and have some talent and really do push at it, who don't make it, and those people like you who get to the point where you've got 40 staff and these lovely premises and the shop fronts and everything else that you're doing, and your principles are written throughout it, about the things that you believe in. So what is hard work simply the answer? Is there something else?
There's a few things. I mean, the reason I wrote the book in the first place was because I'd been mentoring various creative businesses from all different creative disciplines, potters and, sculptors and artists and handbag makers and all sorts of different areas. And I'd noticed that there were so many common threads between the things they needed help with in order to succeed and also the things that they found didn't work for them, regardless of what they were doing. So I brought a lot of that together, and there are a few things that really separate a successful entrepreneur, if you like. I mean, I never set out to be an entrepreneur, and I think what happens is creative people, they make something beautiful and they want to make their living out of doing that, and so they have to start a business, but they haven't got MBAs and business degrees or anything like that. They're just really good at being a great potter or a jeweler or whatever. And they find that they have to build a business based on what they can grasp together and grapple from, the world, and find out what do you do to do this thing called starting a business. And so it's a very different mindset from somebody who knows they want to start a .com business, and that they have a completely different mindset. So I think if I was really oversimplifying it, I would say that what separates a successful creative startup from a less successful one is that the successful startup will keep trying and keep doing everything to get their offering right and keep changing what they're doing until it works, whereas the less successful ones think that they're going to just make their pots and they're going to put them on Etsy because that's what everybody does, and they'll make a living. And then when they don't, because they're putting their pots on an extremely crowded marketplace, they think, oh well, that obviously I'm obviously not good enough, or it doesn't work, when actually they're not really trying to solve the real problem there.
Right.
So in the book I talk a lot about defining what success is, first of all, and understanding what you want to feel successful as a creative individual. And then I talk about what I call people's big idea, which is, if you're an amazing ceramicist and you just do what all the other amazing ceramicists do, you're unlikely to really find something that is going to give you that difference that you need to start something really great. And so it's thinking about what you can do to form your big idea. You're going to combine it with something else that hasn't been connected with it before. You're going to combine your love of pottery with aeroplanes, or maybe not aeroplanes, but something that's not been done before. Or you're going to specialize in a completely new way, which is of course what I did when I brought bespoke jewelry to the high street. Or you're going to look at ethics in a completely new way, that's going to sort of involve what you're doing. There's so many different ways of doing that. There's lots of examples, as you say, in the case studies. And so it's really defining, I think a really successful creative needs not only a great creative offering, a great creative product, if you like, but they need that to be different and new in some way. And then they also need often to use their creativity in their approach to the market, where it finds some completely new way of linking it to the market. And so I guess the book is a lot about it. You're right, it's got lots of very practical tips, like how do I price it? But actually it's a lot about changing your mindset and using your creativity in a slightly broader way. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. So it's a combination of doing the work and the things that you're passionate about, but in a way where you find some sort of theme or idea or something that makes it coherent, but also where that idea lands well with the market. Because you could take your work, put some spin on it, or find some niche or something new, and then the market just goes, well, we don't want that anyway.
Yeah.
So that sounds like it's really important. And I think sometimes I think people can get very stuck in the ways. And I think there is a difference between being a pure artist and just want to express yourself.
I've lost count of the number of creatives I've spoken to who come and they say things like, well, I've done this amazing collection of jewellery based on dead rats. And so now I understand. And honestly, there have been many based on actually dead rats.
Oh, really? Literally?
And they say to me, now I've got this amazing collection. I do understand that what I need to do is learn about marketing so that I know how to market it. And their thinking is entirely the wrong way around. And I sort of say to them, do you really think people are going to want to wear dead rat jewelry? I mean, there may be some people that want to wear it, but I don't know them. And so really, you need to think about your market first, before you're not an artist where it's got to be dead rats. I've got to do it.
Yes.
You're a designer. So design for your market. Look at who they are and who the people are that you want to design for, that you think you can inspire and help enjoy your jewelry. And then design something that they're going to want. And then you'll find that you almost don't need to market it because they already want it. It's sometimes there is a big gap between what people think it's going to be like. People often say things like, well, now I've got my jewelry, I just need to start a website and then people will buy it. And they don't really link up with the fact that you've got to find people who how to point them to your website. That's like saying, well, I've got a shop in outer Mongolia, and so now people will buy my jewelry, whereas actually you need to move it to a high street location and know how to do that.
Just to clarify then, when you say dead rat jewelry, it's a jewelry that actually looks like dead rats.
It actually looks like dead rats. I think I've seen something like 8 different collections of dead rat inspired jewelry of one shape or form over the last few years. And so, for example, one of them was sort of silver dead rats and dead rabbits with bright red shotgun wounds in them with enamel that would sort of hang off a necklace. And I don't know about you, John, but I don't know anybody that would actually necessarily want to wear that. So I think sometimes people get very confused about what they're doing actually. I bet those 8 people all thought they'd done the most original thing in the world as well. Exactly. They were so surprised when I said, "Oh, another set of jewelry." But yes, I think it's and some people just make very pretty jewelry, but it just looks like everybody else's. It's nothing new. And they sort of think they're going to really make their living out of doing that. And you really, it's only really the exceptionally talented, or usually the very well connected, that manage to do that. And actually what you need is to approach the market with something completely fresh that it actually wants, or combine some different ideas and make something new. Yes, I found I was saying the same things to so many people that I decided to write the book.
No, that's a good point. And I think this really interests me because one of the consistent themes of my work and of this, the Ideas Lab podcast, is finding product market fit. So this is a term from the startup world. How can you take your creative idea and somehow make it fit into a problem that the market has, or a desire that the market has? So there's a sort of magic that happens between the things you want to do and the world wants. And
exactly.
How do you do it in a way where you still feel satisfied if you've got a creative urge, but also that people are going to buy it? And what you're saying is there's a certain arrogance, I think, to saying, I've done this work. In my opinion, it's brilliant. The world should now queue up to buy it. And if they don't want to, they're just not going to.
Yes. And people often really, really believe that the only thing they're getting wrong is their marketing, that people don't want what they're selling. And they can either not really see how similar it is to other offerings, or that it's not actually what their market want, because they often haven't really thought about their market at all. And the first key to, as you say, solving that issue that you just described is actually, in my opinion, as a creative, really visualizing who your market are and think about, well, what do they want? And if it's not dead rat jewelry, what am I going to love creating that's also really fresh and new that they're going to want to wear? And it's linking those two things together that people often really miss. And they get confused between, as you say, the difference between an artist who's expressing something very pure, but in a way that is often quite difficult to. It's not a commercial way. With a designer where they actually need to answer a design brief, and that design brief has to include the fact that it needs to be something that people want.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. And then once you've found this and it feels like, okay, you've got some traction and people are showing an interest and go, oh, wow, I want that. I mean, I guess one of the tests is initially, if people see you wearing it and go, wow, where is that from? I really like that. You say, well, yeah, I made it. That kind of gets you over that's the first. These are the kind of signals you get at the early stages. So if you've got something good, then how do people then market work that is good? Because I think people are thinking too early, how do I get more website visitors? Or how do I get more Instagram followers? But once you have got over that hurdle and you've definitely got something, people are buying, people who don't know you are buying, what are the channels now? Is it all about Instagram for things like jewelry and arts and crafts and so on?
I think there's always a new channel that I might not even know about yet. And that's not necessarily a technological channel. I think first of all, though, I just want to say that, you talked about once you've got something that everybody wants and they want to buy it. I think the first thing to really master there before you go any further is your pricing, because another thing that I find is a really common theme is that people have an unsustainable pricing structure. So because they're doing it as a hobby or as a sideline and they're trying to build their business, they think that they're just going to take the materials and double them, and then that's their selling price. And so, if you say, oh, I love that ring, and you say, oh, great, well, I made it. And you say, oh, great, how much is it? And I say, well, it's actually £10. You say, great, I love that. That's brilliant. But if you actually have to price it like a business, it's probably going to need to be £60 because you couldn't possibly afford all of your other business expenses and so on, and your own wages out of £10. So, and it may be that if I said, oh, it's £60, you might say, oh, well, it's lovely, but yeah, I won't buy it. And so sometimes people think they've got the product right because their pricing is actually wrong. And that once they think through their pricing properly, that they haven't found the market gap that they think they've found. So I think the first thing is to make sure people get that right. And then when they're confident they've got that right, then I think the next step there is looking at all sorts of different channels. So when I talked about visualizing your customer, that's not only important for when you're thinking of your offering, it's also then figuring out, well, how do I reach that customer? What do they do? Do they go to the theatre? Do they go to cafes, restaurants? Do they fly on planes? How is it that I can reach them? What is it that brings them together as a group of people that I can somehow figure out a new and innovative way of tapping my product into them? So for example, if they go to a particular type of restaurant, can I go to that restaurant and ask them if I can lend them, for a sort of maybe for an event or maybe permanently lend them 20 of my amazingly upholstered chairs, so that people can see them, my potential customers can see them and love them, and maybe even social network about them, and actually start to put my things in front of these potential customers in a completely new way. So rather than thinking, oh, well, I'll just sell them to another craft shop because that's what everybody does. The problem there is that's what everybody does. So there's always a new way. And yes, of course, you can use the more traditional channels now with different social networks, but for me, there's always a new way of getting in front of those customers and building that base in an innovative way that isn't just, well, I'll just keep shouting about it in the ways that everybody's shouting about everything. People can't hear it. There's too much shout going on. You've got to find a new way to really get in front of your customers in a way that then maybe will surprise them, or maybe will, we'll just sort of just make them want what you're putting in front of them if your product's really great.
No, that's good. That's so interesting. So it's so different from, oh, well, how do I get more Instagram followers? It's a lot deeper and a lot smarter than that. So I thoroughly recommend the book, The Creative's Guide to Starting a Business, because I think you illustrate that really nicely. And where
Thank you.
where is Harriet Kelsall Jewellery going next, or where are you going next? You do a number of other things as well.
Yeah. I'm very embroiled at the moment in I have a few voluntary roles. So I'm currently the chair of the National Association of Jewellers, and a non-executive director on a few other boards, which is great because I like bringing people together and helping the industry. So that's taking up a lot of my time. But yeah, as a business, we've got a big just launched a new strategic plan about 2 weeks ago, in fact. And so, yeah, we have lots of new things. I think when you have a successful business of any kind, you need to keep reinventing yourself. You need to keep looking around the next corner and keep finding new ways to please your customers. And that's exactly what we're doing at the moment. And we've got 36 projects from this plan that we're going to be doing as a team. So, yeah, it's all lots of exciting progress to come.
Great. Well, I look forward to seeing what happens next. This has been really interesting. Thank you very much, Harriet.
Thank you very much, John. Nice to speak to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ideas Lab podcast. Please do subscribe, and if you've enjoyed this episode, it would be great if you could leave us a review. You can get links and details of everything mentioned in the podcast in the show notes, along with photos and video clips from many of our episodes. Just go to theideaslab.org/podcast.